Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fiza Jamal bringing you our main stories in detail. We start from the United States, which has claimed Iran test-fired an Al-Shahab-3 missile 1,000 kilometers from southern Tehran. The reported launch comes in the wake of strained relations between Tehran and the West. The Pentagon says the missile's range is part of Tehran's efforts to improve its range and accuracy. It says the missile does not pose a threat to shipping or U.S. bases. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he will visit Iran for talks if necessary in order to resolve tensions. Iran has neither confirmed nor denied the testing of its Al-Shahab missile. Moving on to the United Kingdom, which has decided to deploy a warship to escort all its vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. A government spokesman says the Royal Navy is tasked with accompanying the British vessels. He said the move is aimed at defending freedom of navigation. Tensions between Iran and the United Kingdom intensified after Tehran captured a British oil tanker in response to the seizure of its supertanker near Gibraltar. Britain proposed a European-led mission to secure the Strait of Hormuz, but France says it's unwilling to send extra military assets to the Gulf. The International Organization for Migration says 150 people are missing, feared dead, after a wooden boat carrying migrants capsized off the Libyan coast. The head of the UN's refugee agency, Filippo Grandi, says it is the worst such tragedy in the Mediterranean just this year. The Libyan Navy says more than 300 people were on board, mainly from African and Arab countries. It says 137 passengers have been rescued. Libya has become a major conduit for African migrants and refugees seeking a better life in Europe. Earlier this week, the Libyan Coast Guard intercepted 70 migrants off the coast, escaping the country. Moving on to Afghanistan, where the Taliban have captured Kairan-wa-Manjan district in Afghanistan's eastern Badakhshan province. The district police chief Abdul Wali said government forces did not send reinforcements despite repeated calls for 2 days. The district, known for its large semi-precious gem deposits, fell to the Taliban after 4 days of heavy fighting. The district police chief, along with 40 soldiers, fled to Nuristan province while dozens of others surrendered. Kairan-wa-Manjan district shares borders with Nuristan, Panjshir and Takhar provinces. In a telephonic conversation, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and President Ashraf Ghani have agreed to accelerate efforts to end the war in Afghanistan. U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo has assured the Afghan president that the United States is committed to a conditions-based troop withdrawal. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Joseph Dunford and Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad are in Kabul to discuss the forces' withdrawal. Violence has recently flared in Kabul, with 2 explosions jolting the capital city. Also, the United States has warned Turkey not to make the Russian-bought S-400 missile system operational. In an interview, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Turkey could face more sanctions if it activates the missiles. This comes after the Turkish military announced the second shipment of missiles from Moscow after the completion of the first one. United States has kicked Ankara out of the F-35 program over the purchase last week, saying it undermines NATO security. Meanwhile, North Korea says its latest missile launch was a warning to South Korean warmongers to stop joint military drills with the U.S. Chairman Kim Jong-un said Pyongyang will not stop developing powerful weapons to guard itself. Kim also warned Seoul against importing weapons from the United States. United States-South Korea Joint Military Command said the missile launch has no effect on their defense posture. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the launches are part of Pyongyang's negotiation tactics. He said working-level talks with North Korea could start within a few weeks. Turkish government forces have killed 8 Kurdish militants in southeast Hakkari province that borders with Iraq. The foreign ministry said the militants were targeted by Turkish jets in an air-backed operation over the rural areas of the Yüksekova district. Ankara alleged that those killed in the raid were part of the PKK, which Turkey identifies as a terrorist organization. It said the ongoing military raid is a part of domestic security operations. Palestine has suspended all agreements signed with Israel. President Mahmoud Abbas says Palestine will not bow to Israeli dictatorship and its use of force. This comes after Israel demolished a number of Palestinian houses in occupied East Jerusalem, a move that prompted international criticism. At a Palestine Liberation Organization meeting in the West Bank, Abbas said the move is a response to Israel's violation of signed agreements. He called on the international community to take a stand on Israeli violations in the Palestinian territories. Abbas said it is time to implement the reconciliation deal between Hamas and Fatah, brokered by Egypt. And the United States has imposed more sanctions on the Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro. The Treasury Department has restricted the business transactions of Maduro and his business partners, accusing them of corruption in food imports. Washington says Maduro stole hundreds of millions of dollars from food import contracts amid widespread hunger in the country. The new restrictions target Maduro's stepsons, who allegedly collaborated with a Colombian businessman involved in the scheme. United States in recent months has escalated sanctions against Venezuela, which is struggling with a political and economic crisis. President Maduro has not yet commented on the move. Earlier, his government denied any wrongdoing, saying American accusations are part of an economic war to bring down his government. Representatives from China, India, Russia, and South Africa have arrived in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro for a ministerial meeting of the BRICS group. The talks will focus on countering unilateral sanctions imposed by United States. The meeting of member states' foreign ministers is a prelude to the BRICS summit in November. China and Brazil have confirmed bilateral interactions on the sidelines of the meeting. The European Central Bank has warned of inflation in the Eurozone due to trade conflicts and doubts over a no-deal Brexit. Details in this report.
European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi also pointed to other major risks, including geopolitical tensions. Draghi says the outlook is getting worse for countries where manufacturing is very important.
And the reasons were basically found to be in the general uncertainty that's now been with us for several months, actually more than a year, and which relates, as I said many times, to trade wars, to geopolitical tensions, to now also the possibility of a hard Brexit. Certainly is another factor to take into account.
The central banker says monetary policy can only work up to a point, and governments must step in if the situation worsens.
United States federal government will resume capital punishment after a 16-year-long gap. The 5 death row inmates are convicted of murdering and in some cases torturing and raping children and the elderly. This comes after U.S. President Trump called for tougher penalties on violent crimes. No federal prisoner has been put to death in the United States since 2003. The government has about 60 inmates on death row, but methods of execution and a controversy over lethal injections is still being debated across the country. Well, now it's time for us to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back after the break. We'll continue with our main stories in detail. The Pentagon has arrested 16 U.S. Marines on alleged human smuggling charges. Investigators say information from prior human smuggling probes helped in the arrests. Local media says the arrested Marines opposed President Donald Trump's border reinforcement force and anti-immigration policies. Pakistan's ambassador to the United Nations, Maliha Lodhi, has been unanimously elected Vice President of the Economic and Social Council. Ambassador Lodhi will assume the Asia-Pacific seat in the ECOSOC Bureau. Lodhi says her election as the Vice President of the ECOSOC is a vote of confidence from the global community. She said ECOSOC is at the heart of implementation of the 2030 Agenda for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Lodhi also said that Pakistan has always engaged efficiently with economic and social development activities at United Nations. Four people have been killed in Pakistan after heavy monsoon rains brought havoc to the capital, Islamabad, and nearby areas. The city district government has issued flash flood warnings and emergency alerts for low-lying areas. A storm near the capital, Islamabad, produced 160 millimeters of rain over the last 24 hours. Rescue officials say a mother and her son drowned in floodwaters, while 2 men have been swept away in flash floods. Meanwhile, in India, incessant rain, flooding and lightning has killed over 450 just this month. The overall death toll across South Asia has risen to over 660. Speaking of bad weather conditions, a heat wave has swept over London, giving it the second hottest day on record. The hot spell originating from the Mediterranean raised temperatures to 37.7 degrees Celsius in London and its surrounding areas. This report has more.
Local weather forecasts say the country's heat wave should last for about 3 months until October. It was a new July temperature record for the entire United Kingdom. Many commuters had to travel on sweltering tube lines not equipped with air conditioning.
In this country, I haven't experienced it this hot. The tube was very hot. I think there's no air conditioning on there, and it wasn't so crowded. I was lucky today, but it was very hot. I have air conditioning in my bedroom. Yes, I'm lucky to have it.
The authorities say the underground rail lines won't get air conditioning until 2030. Londoners have been using air conditioners, fans and freezers to help them endure the heat. Locals and tourists struggle to cope with intense heat in southern Spain. In Belgium, the weather authority issued its first ever code red warning as the country experiences the hottest temperatures on record.
We have different sensors within the rails, and with these temperatures it can be that these sensors they will malfunction. If that happens, we have a problem, of course, because these sensors they will give our personnel a notice where a certain train is at a certain moment. If you don't know that, you can't have trains running safely.
Météo France says an afternoon temperature of 40.6 degrees Celsius has been recorded in Paris.
The European Commission's president-elect says the bloc plans to launch a special fund to wean members off of fossil fuels. Ursula von der Leyen revealed the plan during her visit to Poland. This report has more.
Leyen said the EU will create the Just Transition Fund because new technologies being adopted in the region require investment. Meanwhile, the EU has also asked the bloc's top court to take action against Spain and Bulgaria over poor air quality. According to the European Environment Agency, nitrogen dioxide causes about 9,000 premature deaths every year in Spain.
We need to care for our earth we live off, and that we want a healthy and clean planet. And therefore we have to step up with climate change, which means a lot of innovation and clean technology.
With the UK scheduled to leave the EU by October 31st, Leyen said she will launch consultations on the bloc's future after she takes office.
And an international doctors consortium says Congo's Ebola outbreak is worsening because of a lack of awareness and health facilities. United Nations World Health Organization declared a global health emergency following the outbreak in the country. The International Medical Action Alliance said a majority of victims were dying at home without medical care. They said patients are reluctant to go for clinical trials for fear of dying in isolation away from their families. Congo's health ministry says victims' families are contracting the disease at an alarming rate. Over 1,700 people have been killed by Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo this year so far. And China has successfully launched its first commercial rocket capable of carrying satellites into orbit. The rocket Hyperbola-1 carried 2 satellites into the pre-selected orbit from a facility in the Gobi Desert. The 20-meter-long rocket has a maximum diameter of 1.4 meters with a liftoff weight of 31 tons. It reached an altitude of 300 kilometers in the orbit. The Hyperbola-1 rocket is designed by private lunar exploration startup iSpace. A German charity, Skate Aid, is trying to bring life back to the war-torn Syrian city of Qudsaya by teaching children to skate. To help, the organization built a skate park in the city a month ago, and now children are hoping to become professional skaters. More in this report.
NGO founder Titus Dittmann believes skateboarding can teach children traumatized by years of conflict and violence to stand up to falling. Skate Aid has built several skate parks in war-torn countries, including Iraq and Afghanistan, and Syrian children are overjoyed to have one in their locality.
Yeah, we used to sit on it. We did not know how to stand up on it because we never experienced this before.
The park provides skateboards and other much-needed equipment to children.
I love the kids here. They're so nice. They learn so fast, and they're super kind. Just like giving me gifts and wanting to skateboard. It's amazing. Yeah.
With skateboarding making its Olympic debut in Tokyo in 2020, children of war have a chance to fulfill their dreams.
And now let's take you to the world of business, where Asian stocks have dropped following mixed U.S. earnings reports. Stocks fell after the European Central Bank disappointed investors expecting an immediate easing. Japan's Nikkei lost over 0.5%, while Shanghai's shares ticked down as well. But Shanghai recovered its losses later after sliding. South Korea's Kospi and Hong Kong's HSI both slipped almost 0.5% as well. Australia's ASX 200 is down marginally. The dollar is trading near a 2-week high versus the yen as investors paired expectations for aggressive Federal Reserve rate cuts. And in sports, Ireland are eyeing a historic win in the first ever test match against England. England have recovered to set up a 200 runs lead for Ireland to chase for the loss of 9 wickets. England's middle order collapsed again in the second innings, with numbers 4 to 7 scoring a total of just 52 runs. Ireland rounded up the Lions for a paltry 85 in their first innings. In reply, they too scored a modest 207 in a jittery batting performance. Ireland are slight favourites, but it is unlikely to be a comfortable chase. The finals of the Fortnite World Cup will take place in the Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York this weekend. The Fortnite prize pool of $3 million will be the biggest giveaway at an esports event so far. Hundreds of finalists have been shortlisted out of 40 million challengers for the winning prize of $3 million. 30 nations will be represented by the finalists, with 70 players from the US, 14 from France and 11 from the UK. Each finalist will take home at least $50,000. The runner-up, as well as third and fourth placed finishers, will all become millionaires by the end of the tournament. In football, Manchester United beat Tottenham Hotspur 2-1 in the International Champions Cup trophy. Anthony Martial opened the scoreline for United in the 21st minute before Lucas Moura equalised the 65th. Angel Gomez then added another for United, which turned out to be the decider. Well, it's not raining in Lahore anymore, but it's awfully humid. But let's find out what the weather is looking like today around the globe. These are all of our main stories we have for you in detail. You can follow up on all of these stories. Find us online by the name of Indus.News.